right, it's another film study. Have you had enough of the bye week yet? Because it's time to look ahead. It's your Know Your Foe episode, and this weekend is Steelers. It's not the same Steelers-Ravens rivalry as in years past, but it's always a great rivalry and an exciting Sunday. Ken McKusick, how you doing?
Life's good, Josh. How about you?
I'm doing well. I still have trouble believing that this is a 1 o'clock game. It feels like it's been a long time since we've had a 1 o'clock Steelers matchup.
Yeah, they don't always get one per year at 1 o'clock, but yeah, they've been some great games regardless of when they've been played.
All right, and joining us again this year is Alex from Steelers Depot. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. And yeah, 1 o'clock Steelers Ravens. This feels like primetime football all the way. At least that's how it should be.
Well, they really wanted to get, what is it, Eagles Giants at Sunday night or something? A
That
really
barn burner.
exciting game.
hmm
That's really incredible, honestly, that they would do that. Alex, so happy to have you here as always on the show. Josh, we need to get some business we need to take care of ahead of time here, or do we
Yep.
get time to introduce Alex for a second?
I mean, let's take care of my bookie. You guys heard us talk about my bookie constantly because we love my bookie. You can go over to my bookie, use the code Ravens, get a nice deal. We'll talk about in a minute. Whatever you want to bet on, NFL, college, election, social issues. They've got all types of stuff on there. I'm always surprised some of the stuff that you can bet on my bookie. I'm having a great week on my bookie as I took the Cardinals and then the Rams and then the Dodgers twice. Worked out really well for me this week. So make sure you go on over to my bookie and use our promo code Ravens to claim a deposit match, which is dollar for dollar up to $1,000. So if you throw in $1,000, they're going to give you $1,000 free to gamble with if you use our code Ravens with your first deposit.
Remarkable benefit there to get a full match on $1,000, and if you have reasonable luck, you should be able to get through that and have something left by the requirement for the rollover to be done. So at the very least, you get some inexpensive gambling for a long period of time there.
And if you really suck at gambling, it's still a lot of fun because it adds some extra pressure on the game. So definitely my bookie, use the code Ravens. All right, Alex, tell us about Steelers Depot and your Twitter handle and a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm a writer for SteelersDepot.com. Been there since 2013. We just covered the Pittsburgh Steelers wall to wall, every aspect from a statistical standpoint, analytical. We have our podcast as well, the Terrible Podcast. We do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, bring on different beat writers and different guests and things like that. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Alex_Kozora and find all my Twitter nonsense over there.
Highly recommended follower, and you should follow the big names for the other teams in the AFC North. Do yourself that favor and at least get the news so you're not having to ask other people, what's going on with the Steelers injury report and whatnot, because I'm sure Alex already has tweeted about that, for example, today.
Well, I appreciate you saying that would you say some of the big guys? I'm not one of the big guys, but I appreciate the compliment.
All right,
Now,
definitely a big analyst.
Now, Ken, can I squeeze in just a moment of Ravens talk before we dig into Steelers talk?
Yeah, sure, if you must.
Because we have not, there's one guy that we haven't talked about who joined the Ravens practice squad this week, and it's a big name, even though it's a practice squad. I'm sure Alex is concerned about Des Bryant joining the Ravens.
Well, he was just taking a drink of water there, and I noticed it almost came out on his camera.
Almost a spit take.
I was going for the spit take. But people get excited because Des Bryant is a big name or was a big name. And I feel like when I look on my Twitter feed that people think this is like signing Anquan Bolden or Steve Smith.
Because people say so.
Yeah, because that's what they're comparing it to on Twitter. And that's why I wanted to take a moment for you to kind of set some real expectations here.
I'm going to start, and then Alex, I really want to hear your reply to this. But Des Bryant in his first day at practice wore a scout team jersey with number 11 on it, indicating that he might have been playing the role of Chase Claypool on the scout team trying to do that. Because 88's open for the Ravens. I can't believe that's not the number that Des Bryant will eventually wear if he ever suits up for a game. But I think the chance is probably still less than 50% that he ever plays, but certainly he's cleared one of the hurdles to be signed to the practice squad. Obviously, he's passed a conditioning test of some sort to be playing. Those weren't sure things, so he's beaten the odds already to a certain degree.
Are you asking for my thoughts on the Des
Yes,
Bryant?
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I assume he's not playing this weekend, right? I think that's a pretty safe bet,
I
correct?
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if he wants to wear that number 11 and try to run like Chase Claypool, I mean, I don't know how good Des runs it at his age right now, coming off some of the injuries he has. But maybe we'll see him on Thanksgiving. I know you guys are looking for a second receiver. I know Hollywood Brown's having a really strong year. You know, Mark Andrews, Hollywood are really the focal point of the offense. You're trying to find that other outlet, whether that's Willie Snead or Miles Boykin. So I guess it's just trying to find another number two true wide receiver. But yeah, I don't know if Dez is going to be the guy ultimately.
Yeah, we were. I just say we're not really high on the acquisition, to say the least. It's cheap. People say it's a low cost, high reward move. I think it's a low cost move with probably zero reward. But we'll see how it turns out.
Now, see, I was thinking I could go onto one of these Chinese websites and order my Des Bryant Ravens jersey now, and maybe by the time it arrives, he'll be up with the Ravens.
Well, if you have some extra money burning a hole in your pocket from your gambling winnings, by
Yeah.
all means, go ahead.
You
But
know, the 15 that buy the $15 jersey. So, but all right, let's get into the Steelers Ravens, kind of what the Steelers did this offseason and prospects for this season.
all right, obviously, Alex, big moves from last year to this year for the Steelers. The return of Ben Roethlisberger, we're going to talk about a little bit, but talk about the acquisitions this offseason and a little bit about the draft as well to start with.
Yeah, in terms of free agency, the big acquisitions were tight end Eric Ebron and fullback Derek Watt. Now, unfortunately, Watt's been dealing with a hamstring injury. I think he is going to play this weekend versus Baltimore. He practiced full today after missing the Tennessee Titans game, so that'll be good. Really, that move was almost as much, if not more, about special teams value than it was at fullback, but it certainly helped in both regards, and he's played well, especially on the kick coverage unit and things like that already this season. And Eric Ebron, I think, has been overall a positive influence on the offense. You know, last year, granted, there were so many issues with the offense as a whole and quarterback play and things like that, but they really just didn't have production over the middle of the field. Partly because Juju was banged up for a large chunk of the season as well, but they didn't have that presence at tight end. And Ebron is bringing that. And I think last week versus Tennessee, and that win was a perfect example of that. Whenever you face a defense like the Titans that wants to play a lot of too high, play a lot of soft zone coverage, those tight ends are going to definitely make some plays over the middle of the field, and Ebron was capable of that. So as a blocker, he's just bad. I mean, he's just not a good blocker, but there is some want to, and he's got just enough size at 6'4", 250 to be able to get in the way in terms of leverage on his down blocks and things like that. He can't combo block, he can't base block. He's going to be in trouble whenever they ask him to do that. It's had some really negative results, but as an effort guy, as someone that can be a presence between the numbers, I think he's been an asset so far.
Is there much use of him with the Steelers run game at getting him out into level 2 or level 3 without making a block at level 1? And would he have the quickness to do that and engage a smaller man in the run game? Because that's a big thing for Ravens tight ends that can't block.
Right. Well, I feel like every Ravens tight end can block, so I don't know who you guys are comparing it to. You guys always have good blockers, but yeah, that's definitely been part of the equation where you're not base blocking the DN or the outside linebacker. You're working and cracking the safety or taking an angle to the Mike linebacker. But there have been times, honestly, where he's blocked at the first level. He had a great down block on J.J. Watt a couple weeks
Hmm.
ago, and that's just leveraging angles. It's not pretty. It's not creating a lot of movement. It's just trying to seal that off so the running back can run off his outside hip. So when you're smart with your leverage and angles, because there's effort, and again, he's not a small guy. You see so many of these tight ends today that are 6'2", 230 coming out. They're just slightly bigger receivers coming out of the college game. I mean, Ebron is a pretty big dude coming out of North Carolina. It's just the technique and the strength functionally really isn't there, but he can get in the way enough, and that makes him a good enough blocker for what the Steelers need. And the backup tight end, the number two tight end, Vance McDonald, is actually a pretty good blocker, so it kind of works well.
All right. How about the draft? Now, Claypool, obviously the biggest name coming out of this draft, but who else? Who else? Talk about it from top to bottom.
Yeah, overall, it was very weird not having a first round pick for the first time since I think 1967. It was. I mean, pre Chuck Noll stuff. The last time they didn't draft in the first round, obviously that was part of the Minka Fitzpatrick deal in 2019 that traded away the first round pick. But I think overall, just top to bottom, I've been impressed by this rookie class and the impact that these guys have been able to make right away, given the lack of total absence of a spring program, no rookie minicamp, no OTAs, no 3-day minicamp, things like that, and no preseason on a very weird training camp overall. They couldn't practice at their normal location for training camp for the first time in decades. So I think just the readiness of guys like Chase Claypool, I think, Kevin Dotson, the guard from Louisiana Lafayette, Alex Highsmith from Charlotte. Those guys have all made positive impacts so far, some bigger than others. I think Claypool has certainly gotten the headlines. Dotson's really played well at guard, starting for David Castro when he's been injured. And then Alex Highsmith has kind of emerged and taken over the number 3 outside linebacker role as the season's kind of gone along. But I think the one thing that's the key to some of that success is that the Pittsburgh normally drafts underclassmen, especially early. You look in the first and second rounds, they historically consistently draft redshirt sophomores and juniors. This year they went with a lot of seniors. Claypool, Dotson, Highsmith were all seniors. I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that. These were guys they knew more, were more comfortable with. They had a clearer evaluation of these guys. And I think a byproduct of that was they got guys that were more mature physically and mentally and more just year one ready to handle a pandemic and handle all the unique obstacles that a rookie's going to have on top of the normal obstacles a rookie's going to have. So I'm just really impressed with the overall conditioning and level of readiness and lack of mental mistakes for some of these guys. And I think the fact that they were seniors coming out has played a big role in that.
Okay, so they more grown man strength for players like Dotson, say, to play their position. Talk a little bit about Anthony McFarland because he's a Maryland guy and where he is in the Steelers rotation right now.
Yeah, he was I think, lone underclassman of the draft. But again, there were some familiarity with him where Matt Canada, the Pittsburgh Steelers' new quarterback coach, coached McFarland at Maryland. So they had that common thread there. Now he's worked the rotation a little bit. James Conner's still the feature back. He's still the bell cow. He's been healthy this year. So overall, he's the guy. But McFarland has worked in occasionally. I wouldn't call him a change of pace guy, just someone that comes in whenever Connor needs a breather and certainly brings an element of speed to this game we've seen in limited fashion so far. So it's been a relatively small impact. I mean, Connor's getting 75% of the snaps. Benny Snell is a third down situational goal line type back. So there isn't a big role there for McFarland right now, but you can definitely see that element of speed. And that's nice to have because obviously James Conner isn't that guy. Benny Snell isn't that guy. Jalen Samuels isn't that guy. So it's good to have that change up and have that different type of running back in the mix.
Okay. Now, the other thing I like to ask people about is the third and fourth year players on the Steelers. And it seems like that's a particularly important question for the Steelers this year with some of the cap situation they're in, which we're going to get to in a second. But who do the Steelers have really that's in year 3 or year 4 who they're either concerned about losing to free agency or that maybe a guy they would sign early after a third season?
Well, in terms of the year 4 guys, I think because they got a ton of free agents after this year. I mean, this roster is going to look so much different and so much worse this time next season just because of the looming cap crunch and how many free agents are set to be both fourth year guys and guys coming off the second year of their contract or second contracts, I should say. The biggest one is Juju. I mean, he's going into the last year of his deal, and there's going to be a question about whether or not he's going to be able to be retained. Do you franchise tag him and things like that? He's playing well this year. The stats don't always show it. But I think he's having a really good season and a bounce back from last year. In terms of some third year guys that are playing well and guys that I think are ascending, wide receiver James Washington has become a situational deep threat, but certainly a guy that can get over the top of a defense and make big plays. And I've been really impressed with Terrell Edmonds, the strong safety for Pittsburgh in his third year out of Virginia Tech. He was definitely criticized heavily by myself included his first 2 seasons as someone that just felt like a reach. It felt like a reach at the time. Everyone thought Edmonds was a day 2 pick, not a day 1 type pick. But he's definitely impressed. He's grown physically, mentally. His ball skills and coverage ability has improved. He's no Minka Fitzpatrick by any means, and the dude hasn't had a turnover since I think week 3 of his rookie season back in 2018. But he's become a solid, reliable tackler, a good box safety, and somebody that I think is starting to shed. I never considered him a bust even last year, for example. He wasn't an Artie Burns or a Jarvis Jones or some sort of just terrible total whiff of a first round pick, but he was definitely a disappointment. But I think he's starting to shed that disappointment label and turning into a solid safety in year number 3.
Is Edmonds someone who can play on the back end alone or as a split, or really is he more of a guy that they want closer to the line of scrimmage in, say, a dime back role or as a strong safety that's closer to the line?
You definitely want him closer to the line. The closer he is to the line of scrimmage and to the action, the better he plays. He'll play split safety and he can cover the deep half, and that's fine. He does a little single high, but you really don't. It's not where he's comfortable because, again, the ball skills are pretty limited, and that's Minka territory. They'll rotate some cornerbacks, Mike Hilton, Cam Sutton, who have some safety ability and rotate to the deep middle or deep half. So Edmonds doesn't always have to do that. So he's definitely better near the line of scrimmage. He's in the box about 25% of the time, according to our charting. So closer to the line is where he's going to thrive.
Two guys you mentioned, or one guy you mentioned there anyway. Cam Sutton, a cornerback, is in year 4 coming up. I assume on free agency.
hmm
Mike Hilton is in year 4. I believe this is his RFA year, and Matt Filer also there.
they will all be unrestricted free agents after this season.
Okay. So, do you have a sense of what the Steelers are going to do? I mean, is extending Roethlisberger part of the first step in a plan like this, or is this at the point where they finally say, well, we have to eat some dead money and finally say goodbye to Ben?
No, it's not going to be saying goodbye to Ben. The question will be, will Ben want to do an extension and how he feels and what his commitment's going to be? But assuming he wants to do that, that's probably going to be almost certainly in that case, if he's willing, an avenue to help clear up some money because there is a massive cap crunch that every team is dealing with. Pittsburgh, especially, they were already going to be in a pretty dicey cap situation pre-pandemic. Now post-pandemic, it's tenfold multiplied how difficult a situation this is to navigate. So I mean, I could just give you the laundry list of free agents after this season. On offense, it's Juju, James Conner, Matt Filer, left tackle Alejandro Villanueva. Defensively, it's Bud Dupree, who almost certainly will not return,
Hmm.
which will be a huge loss for the Steelers defense. Him and TJ Watt are, to me, probably the best edge duo in football right now. Mike Hilton, Cam Sutton, as you mentioned, some defensive linemen are also going to be unrestricted free agents. I mean, there are just a slew of guys, and they may be able to keep a couple of those lower end guys, but they will not be able to keep the majority of those guys. And they're going to have to try to replace that through the draft because you will not have the funds to do it through free agency. And again, this roster is going to look a whole lot worse a year from now.
Right. Well, it's the question comes up. I mean, other teams seem to be doing the tank and then win. They really want to ride that roller coaster parity the NFL salary cap provides. And if you're next to contend after Ben Roethlisberger is gone, why extend Ben Roethlisberger? Why not just allow the cliff fall off in 2021 and move forward with the organization that way?
Well, I mean, as long as you have Ben, you got a chance. I'm not saying that they can't win a Super Bowl next season. It's just this is just going to be the best chance to do it. So if Seven's willing to play, you play him and you pay him because that's going to be the dude to give you the best chance to win a Super Bowl. We saw how terrible this offense went into the tank without him last year. So you're right, Ken. Inevitably, that day is going to come. But the further you can push that down the road, and especially for I don't think he'll ever admit it, but for Kevin Colbert, who's going to retire in a year or two, if he can go out when Ben goes out, then that's probably perfect for him, and he can just walk when Ben walks as well. So you want to just try to stretch that window open as long as possible.
Okay, so it could be the rumors I've heard are of a 2-year extension, so that would mean 3 more years of Roethlisberger potentially to get that cap a little bit under control.
Yeah,
Reasonable?
yeah, that sounds reasonable. I don't have any insight to what the particulars of a deal would be. The Steelers don't discuss this stuff in season, so I'm sure that will be addressed shortly after the off season begins. But yeah, 2 year extension probably sounds reasonable.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Ben, the quarterback, so far this last year. Obviously, he's come back a very different guy than he was before. And the thing I'm seeing mostly is a guy who really wants to get rid of the football quickly, more of a surgical striker, late Peyton Manning, than a play extending frustrator of the Ravens that we had in previous years.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt he's become that kind of guy. For the first half of his career, he was backyard Ben. He was Sandlot Ben, make it up as you go along, throw Terrell Suggs off, take a punch from Haloti Nada, like that kind of Ben. And he certainly evolved when he's had to, because he couldn't do that at 38 years old. He's obviously not capable of that, just in terms of his physical decline overall. Your knees are probably pretty sore when you're 38 when compared to when you're 24 years old. But honestly, he hasn't changed post injury. In 2018, he was one of the quickest quarterbacks in terms of snap to throw. And that's the same story here in 2020. He is now the quickest quarterback in terms of snap to throw. I think it's about 2.3 seconds. And so That's no different from really where it was in 2018, or only just very, very insignificantly so if you look at the numbers. But one downside to that is, and you saw this in the Tennessee game, was defensive linemen. They're not stupid. They know how quickly Ben gets the ball out, and so it's leading to more tip passes this year. I think he's
Hmm.
got 7 batted balls this season. One of them resulted in a pick last week versus Tennessee. Jeffrey Simmons got a hand on one. So I'm sure Baltimore realizes this, and they're going to have their interior linemen or even edge rushers that are going to be able to key RPOs, and when linemen are cutting and reading bench shoulders and a 3-step drop is coming, let's get your hands up because you're not going to get to him. So I think Ben has had to evolve into that rhythmic pocket passer to preserve and prolong his career. But the one downside of that has been more tip passes, more batted balls, and that's been a bit of an issue this season.
All right, some really interesting stuff there. Is Ben still holding the football some, such that there's hope for sacks? I mean, obviously the Ravens just got Yannick Ngakoue, and one of the things that's exciting about that is the opportunity to get some coverage sacks for a defense that has a very good secondary, and to let those develop over time. Is Roethlisberger evolved as a quarterback that he's too smart to hold the ball even really ever?
Well, he'll still be backyard Ben occasionally. It's just not commonplace. He had an underhanded flip to Eric Ebron last week
Saw
that was
that.
a Mahomes type play. So he'll still do that occasionally. It's just not part of his regular arsenal. So he can be sacked. He's got 8 sacks in 6 games this year. So the numbers have been low, obviously, and the O line has pass protected really well. And I think guys like, Alejandro Villanueva have played extremely well this season. Some young guys like Kevin Dotson when he filled in for DeCastro at right guard, Chukwuma Okorafor, who lost the right tackle job to begin the year, became the starter week 2 when Zach Banner went down with a torn ACL in week 1 against the Giants. He's playing really well as well, and that's been impressive. Another third, fourth year guy that is stepping up, but you can still get to him, of course. I think it's just harder than years past.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk about the offensive line, Lila. You just hit on some of them, but go across from left tackle to right tackle if you would, and tell us who the Steelers have there.
Sure. The starting five this weekend is projected to be Alejandro Villanueva at left tackle, Matt Filer at left guard. He was the right tackle last year, kicked inside with Ramon Foster's retirement. Marquise Pouncey at center. David DeCastro is back at right guard, and Chuck Wilma Okorafor is at right tackle. So it's been a solid starting five. They've had their warts. Filer's been a little weak in pass pro, a little bit weaker than what I thought he would be. But overall, I think this unit has done a good job. And second year offensive line coach Sean Surrett, who took over from Mike Munchak full time last year, I think has definitely taken big strides forward in year number 2.
Okay, so Marquise Pouncey is a player who is now 31 and has shown a little bit of decline probably over the last couple of years. What can you tell us about where he is right now? Is that an accurate description, first of all, that I've given, or is he still playing at a kind of a Pro Bowl level from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say there's been some level of decline. I mean, a site like Pro Football Focus really hammers on this on that guy more than anyone else, and they make him out to be some sort of like below average backup type, and he's certainly not that guy. Last year was weird with snaps. His snaps were really erratic in 2019. I don't know if that had to do with the quarterback change and the revolving door from Ben to Mason Rudolph to Duck and that rotation they had the rest of the way or what. But it's been cleaned up this year and the snaps are more consistent. And that's good to see. He's dealing with a foot injury. It's been recurring for a couple weeks. He's had to leave at the end of games for a couple weeks now with a foot injury. So I don't know if that's impacting him. But I know Baltimore always gives him fits, and Brandon Williams and those big guys up front, they're always a handful. Pouncey's never had as much success against the big, strong 0 and 1 techs as he does against the quicker 3 tech type of guy. So Pouncey's still playing well. There's been slight decline in Baltimore. I think will give him his typical Raven difficulty.
All right. Wide receivers. Let's go to those, and obviously everybody's excited about Chase Claypool and seeing him for the first time in this rivalry.
It's a strength of the team, Ken. The depth they have here is remarkable, and so it's always hard to predict. People ask me, "Well, who's the number one receiver in this offense?" And I say there really isn't one. I mean, they're all capable of being that guy on any given week. In week 1 against the Giants, it was Juju with 2 touchdowns. Chase Claypool had 4 touchdowns against the Eagles. James Washington had a big game versus the Browns. Juju and Deontay Johnson, returning from injury, had big games versus Tennessee last week. So there's so much well-roundedness on this team that it really is just based on how a defense wants to play you. If you're Cleveland, 2 weeks ago they played a lot of single high, a lot of jamming at the line of scrimmage, a lot of press man coverage, and that allowed Pittsburgh to open up the deep ball. And so Claypool had a big catch down the left sideline for, I believe, 36 yards. James Washington had a 28-yard touchdown on a double move that got him wide open versus Denzel Ward. Tennessee, meanwhile, had a totally different approach. They played, as I said earlier, a lot of two deep zone, a lot of soft coverage. They kept everything in front. So that let Juju and Deontay Johnson and Eric Ebron have big games underneath. I mean, Johnson and Juju were targeted, I think, 14 and 15 times respectively. And James Washington and Claypool basically did nothing that game. So it really just depends on how a defense plays you, and that's going to dictate who's going to get the football, whether those are deep passes to Claypool and James Washington or more of the shallow crossers and zone sits with Juju and Deontay Johnson, but a lot of weapons here, and I think that's one reason why this offense has been so successful.
Of course, the Chiefs picked the Ravens apart with a lot of shallow crossers, a lot of rubs, and those rub and pick routes off the bunch formation that show up for Pittsburgh for years have always been very frustrating. And I won't get into it, but anyway,
I feel some anger,
yes,
depression going on there.
There's been some various levels of difficulty, but the one thing that Patrick Queen has failed at really as a rookie is in really understanding how to cover those short routes. And a lot of it is just failure directly off the line of scrimmage against bunch formations and against really understanding his responsibility there. But he's also had problems with trailing a crossing route that passes through his zone and not really understanding how to pass off to the next zone. So Patrick Queen's been a fine player so far this year, but I'm thinking if there are opportunities to get him off the field on third down, the Ravens now have the personnel to do that.
What personnel? Who you bring?
Well,
in to
with
replace him?
Yannick Ngakoue, the five I think we'll see on third down. The Ravens play a dime defense traditionally on third and pretty much anything, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4 even or more. So then you'd see five guys if it's 3rd and maybe 6 or longer, and that would be Judon and Bowser, who both have a lot of short zone coverage area skills. You'd see Campbell, of course, probably playing on one edge. You see Ngakoue on the other edge, and then you see McPhee somewhere in the middle. By the way, McPhee, tremendous resurgence the last 2 weeks. He's been very dangerous. And so, he's one of the players I really hope, can make a difference. He certainly is a tip ball guy too. So he and Campbell both.
What's the story on Bowser? I liked him coming out of Houston. It felt like he had a quiet start in Baltimore. Was that just lack of opportunity, or am I missing something with Bowser?
I think the last 2 years have been very good. For his first 2 years, he was a mild disappointment. This is often the case with players that come to Baltimore and you want to get them in on the defenses. It's already a fairly deep defense. And so, it becomes harder to get those guys in. He showed a little more bend as a pass rusher last year, but that's really not his strength. What his strength is he brings scheme to the Ravens pass rush by being able to drop to coverage when he needs to. He's a good stunter. The Ravens now have an unbelievable core of under stunt players. To have three guys, really Wolf, Campbell, Matabike, who really can support underneath stunts, and they have lots of guys who can do overs. Judon and Bowser, both the options. So I think one of the things we'll see, and this is a Know Your Foe episode, so I want to get back to the Steelers in a second, but I think we'll see Judon off the line of scrimmage a little bit in this game, rushing from what is effectively a Mike linebacker position, and he's very savvy about getting his gap there. So it'll be one of the things. And unfortunately, I think Ben gets rid of the ball quickly, and it probably will not have the impact we'd hope. But I really expect Judon's stats to just go through the roof based on the acquisition of Ngakoue.
That's an interesting point, Ken, and I'll get back to the bunch thing in a moment here. But it's funny you mentioned about how effective that those guys are at stunts. I was going to say the same about Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward, to me, might be the best crasher in football. Like Bud Dupree should definitely give Cam Hayward a commission when he gets paid this offseason because of the number of times Hayward's been able to attract double teams. And he gets crafty as a veteran. He will, when he crashes into the B gap, he will grab the tackle's jersey, the left tackle's jersey, while still drawing the attention of the left guard to ensure he basically occupies both guys so Dupree can loop in underneath. And Dupree's gotten multiple pressures and sacks this year off of that. So and those are just the veteran things you pick up along the way that refs never call, but they're really effective.
They used to call it on Casey Hampton occasionally, but it used to piss me the hell off that they didn't call it more. And he's definitely a grab two players and let the rest of the play take care of itself.
He said
guy.
the same about Nada and Kelly and all those guys. It's a two-way street, my friend.
All right. I don't know. Whatever. We won't say he's worse. Let's just keep going here. Wide receiver course. Yeah, go ahead.
To go back to the bunch, the Steelers have been using that a lot. They're using a ton more motion this year. I think they're 4th in motion rate this year, and they were terrible last year. I don't know where exactly they were last year, but they never used motion, and certainly the quarterback play affected that. But they brought in Matt Canada, who kind of bringing that college style of offense from Pitt and Maryland and LSU and places like that. So they're using a ton more pre-snap motion. They're getting receivers involved in the run game. Chase Claypool. They got a
Hmm.
pretty unknown guy in Ray McLeod, a little speedy return guy. He's the kick and punt returner right now. So that'll be a new thing for Baltimore to handle this year in terms of Pittsburgh. I know they saw it in Kansas City, so it's not brand new for Baltimore to defend conceptually, schematically. But for Pittsburgh, you're going to see a lot more pre-snap motion, and watch that little pick and rub play on anything 3rd and 3 and closer. They're going to
Hmm.
bunch it up. They're going to run a slant underneath, and they're going to hit Claypool or Juju or Ebron. So Patrick Queen better be ready to defend the bunch slant on 3rd and 3 and closer.
There you go. There you go. I mean, it's certainly the Steelers use it more as a release and diagnose the coverage method. They're usually in motion with the wide receiver as opposed to a tight end.
In terms of the pre-snap motion, is
That,
that what
that's what I'm
you're?
asking.
Yeah, well, it used to be just more of an ID cover thing, see what's man zone, but now they're using it honestly to block defenders with receiver motion, or they'll hand it off and they'll run jets and end around and things like that. So it's really evolved, and that's probably a lot to do with Matt Canada. But I give offensive coordinator Randy Fichtner a lot of credit for being innovative and allowing those ideas to be integrated and kind of leaving your ego at the door. So I got a lot of respect for him for doing that. But yeah, it's more than just window dressing or IDing coverage. It's actually become a real staple, integral, effective part of the offense, which is a huge difference from really any year and under Big Ben.
Okay. All right. We talked a little bit, I think, about the running backs before. You can go through a little bit more in that. But what I'm really interested in is talk about whether the Steelers now prefer to run out of 11 or either out of 21 or 12. Where I think of the Steelers as being a team that doesn't often get heavy.
Yeah, they've tried to. Last year, they didn't have their fullback healthy for the entire season, Roosevelt Nix, and they've had fullback injuries this year already. So, I mean, they're obviously a base 11 personnel team. 3 receiver sets are going to be the norm. So that's where you're naturally going to run the football out of, just because that's where you're running most of your snaps out of. But they'll get heavy. They'll run 2 tight end sets, and assuming Derek Watt's available this week in some short yardage situations, they will use a fullback. They're using a 6 offensive lineman a good bit. That's now Gerald Hawkins, who
Wow.
was traded last year, came back this year, and they've had some injuries at tackle. So they will get heavy with a 6 offensive lineman and do some different stuff that way. And they can really run out of anything. Again, commonly 11 personnel, because that's just what their base offense is overall. But they can run out of 12 or 22, or put in a 6 offensive lineman.
You mentioned the 6 offensive linemen because I remember Zach Banner having a very effective game of blocking as the 6th offensive lineman last year, and I can't remember if it was in December or was the earlier game. Something tells me it might have been the earlier game.
Might
And
have been both, but yeah, I think you're right.
okay, he might have played about 8 to 10 snaps as and the Steelers ran very effectively, like over 6 yards per carry on the snaps that he was in. The funny thing about the Ravens is now they hardly ever go to base defense anymore. Hardly ever.
Really?
When they do, it's usually as a response to a 6th offensive lineman. And it's like base is no longer base.
Well, you might be
Yeah,
in base some this week, because the Steelers will run that probably about 10 to 12 snaps.
okay. All right, very good. Other commonplace formation, you mentioned bunch. I think we've pretty much covered this, but is there anything else they run fairly often on offense that's worth looking out for?
In terms of the pass game, there aren't a whole lot of common threads. They run Hank. I mean, every team runs Hank, the curl flat. Tight end run that little 5 yard over the ball route. They run on a 1st and 10 on the scripted plays, usually once a drive, basically, in terms of their opening drive of the game. So Hank's pretty common. In terms of the run game, I mean, they'll run power. And the difference this year is that really last year and for the last several years, whenever they've run power in the run game, it's always been right guard David DeCastro pulling. They really couldn't pull the left guard Ramon Foster. He just wasn't. He could do it a little, but it wasn't the staple. Now they're able to pull both guards. Matt Filer
Hmm.
can pull as well and as effectively and as often as David DeCastro is able to pull. So that's given this offense and this run game a more balanced attack. And everyone would likes to run the football to the right. It's generally the strength of your formation, and they really were limited by that in past years. So that's helped open up the offense, open up the run game. I think that's definitely had some positive results. So in terms of run game, you'll get inside zone, you get power. The pass game, not a ton I can really give you. The bunch stuff, the slants, and Hank is a pretty common concept.
All right. All right, very good. Let's go to the defensive side. And the first thing I really like to do is really understand what are the base pass defense looks and then a run defense look that you might play against 12 personnel, let's say.
Yeah, I think in terms of the run game, one of the most interesting wrinkles, and I've really had a lot of fun breaking this down because the Steelers' run defense has just been a brick wall this year. I mean, they're second best in yards per carry at 3.4, the second fewest in yards per game allowed, I think, at like 66, just right behind the Buccaneers. But they're running this over front, and they don't run it a ton, but they'll do it against a lot of two-back sets. I know you guys use a fullback a good bit with Patrick Ricard and multiple tight ends, and they'll shift the front to the strength. So they'll shift the front, they'll tilt the nose and the backside A gap, and they'll move the strong side defensive end, most often Cam Hayward, over the tight end. So that gets you Cam Hayward on a tight end, which is a matchup Hayward's going to win 100% of the time. And the over front has been incredibly successful this season. I believe offenses are averaging, I think, around 2 yards per carry against it. Their success rate's around 11, 12%. It's really, really just been stout for Pittsburgh this year. So I think if you guys come out in 12 personnel and two back sets and things like that, you're going to see the Steelers over front. You're going to see Cam Hayward on Mark Andrews or Nick Boyle or whoever the tight end is, and Hayward's going to win that matchup. And it gets the strong side outside linebacker off ball too. So if Hayward shifted to that side and TJ Watt's on that side on the left side, for example, TJ Watt's now going to be off ball in the A gap, and he'll shoot that A gap hard to get penetration to force the run laterally into Cam Hayward on the tight end. So I got a video breakdown on Steelers Depot on my YouTube channel last week versus the Browns about how effective that was. That kind of explains it visually better than I probably can right now. But the Steelers over front has been a tremendous wrinkle that no offense has been able to solve so far.
Okay, send me a link to that. I'd love to show that to the other Ravens fans here because I think they'd like to see it too.
Sure.
Have they dealt with any read option quarterbacks as yet this year?
Um, Not in the way they'll see Lamar. I mean, they've definitely dealt with mobile quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz to a lesser degree. I mean, every quarterback feels like every quarterback now can run the football to some degree. That's not Drew Brees or Tom Brady or Ben, but they played Daniel Jones, who's mobile enough, and Drew Lock and Deshaun Watson obviously is a threat, and Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield, though he had the rib injury, so he really wasn't moving a whole lot. So they haven't really, just to answer your question, I guess directly, not really. Definitely Baltimore will be the first test in that regard, but they've certainly faced a lot of mobile quarterbacks this year, and that's not going to be brand new to them.
Okay, so a lot of that in terms of being able to run the ball effectively or being able to decide whether you want to run or pass, which is probably more important, is predicated on having the lead. At least for the Ravens, they're during the Jackson era they're 24-0 when they have the lead or are tied at halftime, and they're 0-6 when they don't.
Mm.
So it's funny. I used to talk about the NBA game, and you just had to sign on or watch the game for the last 2 minutes, and you always thought if you missed the first 30, you missed the game with Lamar Jackson. So
It's interesting though is because they faced all these mobile quarterbacks and talking about the pass game, the Steelers have had to play a lot of zone defense, and that is not their strength. They are at their best when they're playing two man, cover one, stuff like that. And because of the threat of quarterbacks like Watson and Wentz and Mayfield that can make plays with their legs, and of course Lamar is going to be in that category above all those guys. Honestly, that's going to force Pittsburgh to play more zone coverage, and that's where they struggle more than man. And so that's one of my biggest worries this weekend is the Steelers having to play a lot of spot drop zone coverage, get eyes on the quarterback, and that's going to create some soft spots in zone for Lamar to pick apart.
all right, all right, that's a glimmer of hope for this game. Interesting how the line has worked on this game. That it opened up at 5.5 and it quickly reduced to about 3, and now it seems to have stabilized right between 3.5 and 4 right now. Seem about right to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the line did that with Tennessee last week, where I think Pittsburgh entered the game as favorites, and the line moved with Tennessee throughout the week, for something like that. I don't follow the gambling stuff a whole lot, to be honest with you. But it's Steelers Ravens. This game's always going to be close. It's going to be a field goal, fourth quarter type of game, and I don't see any reason why 2020 is going to be different.
Right, not me either. Want to spend some time talking about rotation and snap management, particularly on the defensive line, where those things can add up. Who do they what are they doing now for depth on the defensive line, and how are snaps being managed?
Well, it's interesting. The defense has not had to play a lot of snaps the last couple of weeks. The Steelers have had the ball for 34 plus minutes in four straight games. And so the defense just hasn't had to log a lot of snaps, and they're doing a good job of getting off the field. So you haven't really had to see a significant rotation because Hayward and Tuitt and those guys can play 80%. And because they're only playing maybe 5 plays a drive, they're able to stay fresh overall. The offense is on the field for long stretches and it keeps guys fresh. But overall, in terms of the rotation, replacing Hayward and Tuitt are guys like Chris Wormley and Tyson Alualu, who's starting nose tackle this year, but also play some base end and rotational type stuff, some nickel packages and things like that. Wormley injured his knee. Oh, you guys know Chris Wormley. What am I
Sure.
talking about? He suffered a knee injury though this past week versus Tennessee. He's having an MRI. Did not practice on Wednesday. Don't know his status right now. If he'll play, if he's not available to go, it'll be second-year guy Isaiah Bugg, sixth-round pick out of Alabama, and they called up a defensive lineman Henry Mondeau, who's nose tackle, defensive end, and fullback, actually capable in a pinch. So the rotation's been basically Bugs and Wormley and Mondeau, but of course the guys who just rarely come off the field are Hayward and Tuitt types.
All right. Uh, One thing I want to talk to you about Bud Dupree seems to be having a fine year by most of the traditional numbers, sacks, quarterback hits, those kind of things. He's up among the league leaders. PFF destroys him. Do you know what's behind that?
Where do they rank him? I haven't even checked the PFF
Okay,
numbers.
so I don't know among edge, but he's got a 55.6 overall defensive rating. And
Mm,
people need to go out and buy PFF. I'm not supposed to talk about these directly. It's part of my subscription agreement is I won't do that. But I do encourage people to go out and look at it. And there's usually a different view. They've really banged the hell out of Patrick Queen too, but at least I understand the reason for that. It's really most of some really lousy coverage that
hmm
gets to that. But I don't understand it at all for Bud Dupree, and I was wondering if you could lend any kind of insight into that.
Yeah, I couldn't make any heads or tails of why that rating is so low. I think honestly he may be even better than where he was last year. For my money, he may be the best run stopping edge in football, even better than TJ Watt. I mean, there was a play last week versus Nate Davis, the right guard of Tennessee, who's pulling around. Davis is a pretty big dude, a squatty guy out of Charlotte, and Dupree just throws his shoulder into him and jolts him back and helps tackle Derrick Henry in the backfield for a 3 yard loss. I mean, I think Dupree's playing at a really high level, both in run and pass. They're not dropping into coverage a whole lot. They're dropping as little as ever. I mean, they were Bud Dupree, I think his rookie year dropped into coverage about 25% of the time. They're down to about 5, 6% this year. I mean, these guys are going forward, getting after the quarterback. And I think both Watt and Dupree, their crazy work ethics, they rarely come off the field. They run to the football like crazy. They're super strong and they're good pass rushers. Watt better than Dupree, but both very, very good. And so I think they're among the best tandem, if not the best tandem in football.
Okay, well, fair enough. Watt is number one in PFF's ranking of edge rushers, and Bud Dupree is down at number 51 out of
Mm.
68 guys who played half the snaps. It does not seem right to me, but we'll see. I appreciate you at least commenting on it there briefly. Linebacker, do they have any platooning now? And I know Spillane is in there now as the inside linebacker replacing Devin Bush. Is there any other platooning going on at the inside linebacker spots?
As of last week, there were, because obviously the big loss here defensively is Devin Bush, who tore his ACL out for the season in the Browns game. And that is such a massive loss, not only for the season, but of course, trying to defend someone like Mark Andrews, defend someone like J.K. Dobbins or Lamar Jackson, obviously. So Spillane last week versus Tennessee played in base and nickel, and then in dime, both Spillane and Vince Williams came off the field. And second-year linebacker Ulysses Gilbert III was the dime backer, and
Huh.
he's an athletic type that is in that Devin Bush type of mold. So that's the way they broke it up last week. Now Tomlin said one big reason for that was because they didn't want Spillane to go from backup, not playing at all, to playing every single snap from a fatigue snap management standpoint. So there's a chance that could change as Spillane kind of gets better conditioning and more comfortable with playing those snaps. I doubt it's going to happen this week so quickly, and facing an athletic quarterback like Lamar Jackson, UG3 probably better suited in that dime role than Spillane, but that is the rotation right now. Spillane in base and nickel, and Gilbert III playing in dime packages.
All right. All right. That's a fairly traditional one inside linebacker dime package there
hmm
that you're describing. Who's got the green dot now that Bush is out? I don't. He might have not even had it before, but I assume Minka or is it Edmonds?
Bush had it before. Because he was the every down guy. He was given it this year. Now Spillane has it, which is interesting because I'm not sure who has it when Spillane's coming off the field. I haven't been
Wow.
able to discover that. I don't know if it's UG3, if it's Cam Sutton, who's her dime backer, who's a really intelligent guy, maybe the smartest guy on that defense. It might be Minka. I don't think it's Edmonds, but Spillane has it whenever he's on the field. I'm not quite sure how they're doing things in
I,
dime right now. And for the record, they're in dime basically just end a half, end a game, and anything third and five plus.
Right. So okay, pretty typical use of dime in the NFL today. But if it wasn't Gilbert and Spillane, then I don't know how they could do it, because you have to have really a 1-for-1 exchange of somebody going out, somebody coming in with the
Right.
green dot helmet, or you end up with two on the field.
Exactly. There's honestly a chance that no one has a green dot, and
Hmm.
because it's dime, and maybe they're doing it from the sideline where the coach is just telling UG3, Gilbert the third, this is going to be the play because he's only the dime backer, and so they kind of know what they're running out of dime. So that may even be a solution, but honestly, I have not been able to uncover, and no one's asked Mike Tomlin yet, so I don't know who's replacing Spillane with the green dot when he's not on the field.
Okay, that's fascinating. I mean, that would work if you're going in for one play. It wouldn't work if you're going in for multiple plays, end of half, end of game,
Right.
to try and stop a job and relay signal. So there's got to be something going on there.
Yeah, and you guys are Chuck Clark, green dot?
Chuck Clark is the guy, and behind him, I think Deshaun Elliott is the next guy, because the Ravens don't really have an every down linebacker at this point. Patrick Queen's not playing a lot of third downs, coming into the league the same way Ray Lewis did.
Okay, that's interesting. I thought Queen was the cover guy, but he's just not ready for the intricacies of the NFL. I guess to put it
the
mildly.
the trait-based scouting would tell you he's got the tools to do it, but in terms of just understanding what his responsibilities are, he's not there yet.
Well, that's what
And
Devin Bush was, and he didn't play in dime year one, so that's probably the same arc.
sure, that certainly can work. And all these guys take big jumps usually between year one and year two. And what I've liked about what I've seen from Queen is he's improved in some part of his game every week. But I don't want this to be the week that the Ravens try and make him a good cover game in the most important game of the season. So
Right.
I'd much rather just see a what I call the race car package with 4 outside linebackers and 1 defensive lineman with a dime defense behind it. So it's not too many teams really run that. Now, they never ran that in Baltimore before 2 years ago, but now it's become a very popular package for them.
And you guys are doing a lot of pressure looks off of that. Don't know who's coming, dropping. Is that still the theme
Yeah,
for Baltimore?
it's Judon and Bowser are both on the field for it, so it gives you the maximum flexibility. I don't know if you heard this, but they had sacks by 5 different defensive backs, which was the NFL record. Previous record was 3 for a regular season game
Wow.
in one game, and that was against Washington or Philadelphia or the Bengals. I'm forgetting which game it was recently. It was one of the last 3.
Yeah, Wink Martindale, one of my favorite DCs. He's doing a great job over there.
Yeah, a lot of fun, that's for sure. Is there one player you think that matches up really well against the Ravens this week?
On either side of the football, I think.
Either side.
Yeah, I don't know if there's one. I mean, these are always just so evenly matched games, and Baltimore's defense has played well, and I never underestimate that offense at all. Just speaking of what I'm hearing from you, because I'm just about to get in the Ravens defensive tape, those issues that Patrick Quee might be having in coverage, so I could see someone like a Juju or an Eric Ebron making plays over the middle of the field. But I don't know if there's one name that fits, just because these teams are just always so darn even.
The guy I would pick on the Steelers would probably be Stephon Tuitt, and particularly if he lines up as a 3-tech a fair amount on the right guard, on the
Tyree
side opposite the right
Phillips.
guard, Phillips. Yeah, that would be the one. And so Tyree might be there, or McCary might be there, who's a very short-armed guy, and Tuitt as a bigger man is definitely going to have some arm length advantages that have been really difficult for McCary to deal with.
Mm.
So we're not sure that he's going to start. It might be Phillips if he's healthy. I think it probably will be, but he's very long armed. He gave Fletcher Cox a lot of trouble actually in the game they just played.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think the Ravens could be in a lot of trouble.
And honestly, pound for pound, Tuitt, and I say this knowing the talent on the Steelers defense, Stephon Tuitt might be the most talented player on that defense. And he got hurt last year with a torn pec 6 games in, and he was having a career year, and he's carried it over into this season. So I think regardless of whether it's Phillips, who I know is making the transition from left tackle to right guard, in a pandemic year, it's probably going to be difficult to do. I think that's probably the best pick out of anyone, too. It's going to win, I think, regardless who you guys have at right guard.
All right, fair enough. How are you feeling about the departure of Carlos Dunlap from the AFC North?
Good. I don't have to see him bat down a million passes
Yeah,
on Ben now. I mean, that's what he did every year versus Ben. So, and it's funny because the Bengals traded for B.J. Finney. He was a Steelers backup center guard last year, so now he's back in the AFC North. But yeah, Dunlap was always a thorn in Pittsburgh's side.
All right, we didn't really talk about the secondary as much as we should have here. So why don't I give you another minute here or so to talk about the secondary and where they stand right now?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of regression from last year, maybe because the bar was set so high in 2019 that it was just going to be hard to repeat. There's definitely some athletic regression with Joe Hayden. He's still a really intelligent corner. I think him and Steven Nelson support the run as well as any cornerback tandem in football, but these guys have not played as well as last year. Minka has not played as well as last season. His missed tackle rate is double. Last year, he missed tackles at 10% clip. This year is 20%. He had a key miss on A.J. Brown, 73-yard touchdown versus Tennessee that kind of really gave life to the Titans in the second half of that one that started the comeback. I mean, this guy's still a good player. He's a good playmaker. You got to watch out for him. They're trying to drop him into more of a robber, hook zone type role instead of being in center field to make more plays. But
Hmm.
Minka has not been as strong this year as last year. Terrell Edmonds, as I mentioned earlier, has improved, but overall the secondary has been a slight disappointment. It has not played quite as well. And then from an injury standpoint, slot corner Mike Hilton missed last week with a shoulder injury. He did not practice on Wednesday. I think he's going to play this weekend, especially knowing it's Steelers Ravens. He's going to give it a go, but he's always an aggressive slot corner, great against the run, great blitzer. If he's not available, that will ding the secondary a little bit more.
All right, fair enough. Now the Steelers had a pretty good shot at the Ravens in Week 17 last year because RG3 was in instead of Jackson, of course. What what's different about the defense then from now that would be the biggest addition? I see it's a fairly veteran defense. I'm trying to think of who's really new on that defense right now. But what's different about that defense that should mean that the Steelers would be able to defend much better than they did then?
It's not a whole lot, as you said. The only guys they lost in the offseason before injury struck this year were Mark Barron, which to me was addition by subtraction, and Javon Hargrave, who went to Philadelphia. But now the Steelers have Tyson Alualu at nose tackle, and he's doing a fantastic job. He's found the fountain of youth at 33, 30, 34 years old. Now, obviously, losing Devin Bush is a big loss for this defense, but in terms of addition and why they could be better suited versus Baltimore, I'm not quite sure. But it'll be interesting. In that Week 17 game you mentioned, Pittsburgh had the defensive attack of the mesh charge, where they were just going after RG3 on every even potential read option, regardless of whether he kept it or handed it off. And so they really went after RG3 on that mesh charge. And I wonder if they're going to do the same versus Lamar Sunday, which they did not do in the first meeting versus Lamar last year. So I just wonder what kind of defensive wrinkle they're going to scheme up with because, as you said, it's a veteran team, it's a veteran coaching staff. Keith Butler's been the DC for 5+ years now. He's been on staff since 2004. So they're always going to have some sort of just change up and unexpected attack defensively to try to surprise the Ravens, to try to contain Lamar Jackson or RG3. And so in the case of last year, Week 17, it was the mesh charge. I wonder what's in the Steelers bag of tricks for this week. We'll find out.
All right. I got a good it's a game plan by team that's very discernible to you as you watch the Steelers play. Like that's something that we're really excited about from Martindale is that we always get a different game plan that's really more tailored to the opposing team. It's not just a one speed kind of defense.
And I think it has to be especially in these AFC North games because
Yeah.
each team is so familiar with another. You have to do something different that just kind of throws you off kilter a little bit of an, oh, I didn't expect the Steelers were going to do that. And I'm sure likewise Pittsburgh saying the same about Baltimore and what kind of just little wrinkle, nothing huge, but just little change up and curveball they're going to throw at the opposing offense.
All right. Well, really enjoying that the Steelers and Ravens rivalry is where it is again. This is a great place for it to be, and it should be a great game coming up. Alex, thanks so much for joining us. Let's tell people where they can find your work.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. You can find us over on SteelersDepot.com. We'll have a full Ravens scouting report, offense and defense. It'll come out Friday morning for the website. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Alex_Kozora, Kozora.
All right, Josh, anything you need to talk about?
No, we just please keep sharing the show, spreading it on social media, and going over to MyBookie and use the code Ravens. Right now, MyBookie has the line for this game at 4 points.
4 points. Okay,
So,
that's about consistent with what I've seen overseas.
I'll be avoiding that game, but maybe someone will want to jump on it. I am intrigued by the prop bet. If you go on into the prop bets on MyBookie, and there's a prop bet for if either team will score 3 times in a row.
3 times in a row. Okay.
Yeah, before 3 straight scores by either team.
All right. But by the way, Alex, you may or may not know this. The Ravens have a whole bunch of scoring record streaks on the line here. They have the all-time NFL record, which is incredible. This is the Ravens now with 101 consecutive halves with a score. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
they are within one game of Denver's all-time record for the most consecutive games with 20 or more points at 29. So the Steelers definitely a threat to end that. And if I look back at all the times, the last time they didn't do it, it's like all against the Steelers. So it's this will be a big game and obviously very very important game in the AFC North. Both these teams are going to be there, I feel like, in the playoffs, but the next 5 games in particular for the Ravens going to very much have a big determinant on seeding.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this will be a big game for both sides. Baltimore, especially. Steelers have one streak going on. I forget the exact number. I think it's 63 straight games with a sack. I think like that's
Wow.
second of all time, only behind. I forget who's in first place. I think they're still a ways off from first. So that's the one streak I can give you, and I think the Steelers are probably going to keep that streak alive on Sunday. They better. If they don't, they probably don't win this game.
Yeah, I would agree. It's probably likely anyway. Uh, Outstanding. Go to Film Study Baltimore, folks. Take a look. The offensive and defensive reviews are out there. You can get them in podcast format. You can get them in written format if you want more details, in particular on the individual packages run on defense. You want offensive line scoring. They're
that
out there.
reminds me, Ken, the offensive line grades are now updated.
Outstanding.
Over on filmstudybaltimore.com as well.
Okay, so we finally got the charts done for the offensive line. Thanks very much to @Yoshi2052 for being the guy who does that. A lot of you know him as Josh or as Organized Chaos, and great guy to help and great analyst, so you should give him a follow as well. Anyway, thanks for joining us again, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.